What's going on, everybody? Happy Tuesday. Welcome into an all-new episode of the PackADay podcast. I am your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. It's Tuesday. Thursday is NFL football. Friday is our first Packer game. Sunday is 7 hours of commercial-free football, followed by Sunday night football, followed by Monday night football. It is an amazing time to be alive, and I could not be more excited about today's show because we get to talk about a real-life Packers opponent on game week. We are going to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles today. We're going to take a look at all the different things that they did this offseason. We'll take a look back at 2023 and some of the really unique, not necessarily like matchups. We'll get to that later in the week when we get to the Packers-Eagles preview. But I definitely want to go over some of the unique things to sort of think about as you're getting ready for Packers-Eagles this upcoming Friday, which just feels amazing to say. Before we get there, quick shout out to Autograph. I am working with Autograph to give them exclusive Packers content on the Autograph app. Today, I'm going to be going over the 3 MVPs of the Packers offseason. I'm going to be going over an offensive MVP, a defensive MVP, and a rookie MVP from this past offseason. You're going to want to check that out. And you can only get that on the Autograph app. And in addition, you also, besides the exclusive content, get all of everything that you need from a Packers standpoint. You get all the best articles, all the best podcasts. You get, again, the exclusive content. There's ways to interact with fans, buy tickets. It's so amazing. It's a one-stop shop for all things Green Bay Packers. Or if you are a Bucs fan, a Brewers fan, or any other team in the entirety of basically sports, you can basically get everything you need all in one app. It's awesome. So check out that Autograph app. All right. So that also brings us to our PackADay podcast memberships. Shout out, first of all, to Sarah Young and Michelle Prey for becoming brand new PackADay podcast YouTube members. Appreciate you guys a ton. Today is a great day to sign up because Tuesday night, tonight, is going to be our members-only Q&A for the week, 7 p.m. Central Time. It is only open to PackADay podcast members. You get pretty much every question that's in the chat. We've answered everyone so far. We're getting more and more members, so it may get harder and harder. But so far, I don't think I've ever missed a member's question in a members-only Q&A chat. So if you want to make sure your question gets answered, just become a member. There's a ton of great options available, and make sure to check that out. Again, 7 p.m. Central Time, Tuesday night, for members. And then, of course, you get a bunch of other content and other features as well. So again, check out those memberships over on YouTube. And that brings us to Packers Eagles, or in this case, specifically the Philadelphia Eagles, and kind of where they are at. And in order to sort of kick this off and get started, I want to start with where they are coming from. And that starts kind of with the 2023 Eagles, but really it starts in very early 2023 at the end of the 2022 season when they lost in the Super Bowl to the Kansas City Chiefs. So this is a team that was just in the Super Bowl in the 2022 season in very early 2023, not long ago at all. And they barely lost to the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes 38-35. So this is a very close Super Bowl. They lose it. And then the big question was going to be, how would they respond in 2023? And the answer was no problems, at least to start. They start the season 10-1. They looked like one of the best teams, if not the best team in football up until that point. It was clear that they were going to be a playoff team and somebody that, teams were going to have to fear come playoff time. And then they weren't. After going 10-1 to start the season, they go 1-6 to end the year, including a loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the playoffs, 32-9. Those final games, by the way, it's not like they had just all 1-point losses or anything like that. They lost to the 49ers 42-19. They lost to the Cowboys 33-13. Then they lost to the Seahawks 20-17, so that was a closer one. They lost to the Cardinals, not exactly a powerhouse in 2023. That was a closer one, but 35-31. They lost to the Giants 27-10. I can't say that with that much emphasis because the Packers also lost to the Giants, but I digress. They lost to the Giants 27-10. And then the Buccaneers in the playoffs 32-9, and again, a game that was not even close. Their only win in that time frame was also against the Giants, and that was 33-25. They won by a touchdown. 1-6 to end the year. It was a abysmal end of the season for Philly. And it looked like a team that was a shell of the team that went to the Super Bowl, almost beat the Chiefs, and then started the following year in 2023, 10-1. And you just kind of looked at it at week 12, at that point of the season before they went in their losing streak. And you're just thinking like, man, Philly's going to make a run at this thing again. And then everything just sort of imploded. The offense couldn't get anything going. The defense, we'll talk about the points per game in just a second, but they couldn't stop anybody. And it was just this unmitigated nightmare. And you want to talk about two teams that sort of were the exact opposite of one another. You had the Eagles that started here and just declined through the year. And you had the Packers who started extremely shaky and then just got better and better and better as the season went along. And you just look at, even in that time period, right? The Eagles lose to the Cowboys 33-13. The Packers beat the Cowboys in the playoffs, like pretty easily, So like you just sort of see the differences there. Even the Packers almost beat the 49ers in the playoffs. The Eagles played them in that regular season streak and lost 42-19. Just two teams going in two totally different directions at the end of last year. But you look at this Eagles roster, which we'll talk about in just a moment, and you look at it and you're just like, yeah, I get that they ended the season horribly, but it's really hard not to believe in the talent that is on this Eagles roster. It is pretty undeniable the amount of talent and overall depth that this team has at all the key and important positions. But Philly knew they had to make some changes. Out were offensive coordinator Brian Johnson. Out was defensive coordinator Sean Desai. And in come two pretty established and experienced coordinators, one for sure, and defensive coordinator Vic Fangio, and then one in offensive coordinator Kellen Moore. And the question is going to be, will this new offense for Jalen Hurts and this new defense with Vic Fangio and running a different style system with all this talent on the Eagles defense, will it pay dividends to get them playing back on track the way that they were prior to that brutal end of the year last year? Because I'll say it one more time, when it comes to talent, there is zero question Philly is one of the most talented rosters, especially from a starting player standpoint in the NFL. Like, it is stacked full of talent all throughout the basically entirety of this roster. So the question is going to be, do these new systems help, or do we see some of the same pains and issues and problems that we saw at the end of last year? Or maybe even a different question to that will be, does it just take time to get back on track? And maybe Philly is better towards the end of the year, but how do they look in week one against Green Bay? And again, I think that's what makes this matchup so unique and so interesting for a variety of reasons. But it was sort of like two ships passing in the night last year, where you had this Eagles team that was just declining and this Packers team that was just getting better and better. But now you have this matchup in Brazil to determine, hey, was that real? Or is this a new season and that talent that Philly has is still very real and they're going to be a very difficult team to beat in 2024 and 2025? That remains to be seen. And I think, again, that's what kind of makes this matchup so freaking interesting. Now, the coordinators were not the only changeover for the team. There was a lot of roster changeover as well, as you would expect, as there is pretty much with every team in the NFL every offseason now. But there are some pretty significant subtractions from this team. And starting with Jason Kelce, the best center in the NFL. He's what made that, QB sneak in Philly so potent was his ability. He was a cheat code with some of the, things that he was able to do as a puller and just in the run game in general. The checks at the line of scrimmage, which is now going to be Jalen Hurts' responsibility, puts more on his plate. That is a massive, massive loss for the Eagles. So while the team is still massively talented, losing Jason Kelce is a huge loss along that offensive line. They lose DeAndre Swift to the Chicago Bears. Hassan Reddick, turns out, was a stroke of genius from the Eagles. If you're not familiar with the Hassan Reddick story, Hassan Reddick has been awesome for them the past couple of years. And Philly decided that they were going to move on because they didn't want to give Hassan Reddick a new contract. So they trade him to the Jets. And the Jets give Philly a bunch of draft capital and things like that. And Hassan Reddick has held out through the entirety of this offseason. And it sounded like maybe there was an agreement that Reddick was going to play on his deal, but now Reddick wants that new contract from the Jets, and the Jets were like, no, we had a deal. We weren't going to give you a contract. And I don't know where this ends, but Hassan Reddick has not basically stepped foot in, the New York practices or anything up until this point. And I don't know how that gets resolved. So the Eagles completely rid themselves of the Hassan Reddick headache and replaced him amazingly with a New York Jet edge rusher who we'll talk about in just a moment. Also, Jason Kelce wasn't the only player that retired. Fletcher Cox, the longtime super talented defensive tackle, is another player that was retired in the offseason. And that's going to be a major loss for the interior of their defensive line. So you have two long-standing veterans still playing extremely good football, especially Jason Kelce, that are now gone from the interior of both the offensive line and defensive line. Those are going to be big losses. Kevin Byard, the safety who struggled in Philly, and did not play the full year last year in Philly, but he is gone. He is now a member of the Chicago Bears. Bradley Roby, the corner, and then Marcus Mariota, the quarterback, also gone. Of course, while there were some subtractions for the Eagles, there were also some significant additions as well. In is CJ Gardner-Johnson. Remember, he's a former Philadelphia Eagle who went to Detroit last year, was injured the vast majority of the year, played towards the end of the year, but now he is back in Philadelphia, and they're looking to him to be a key part of that revamped Philadelphia secondary. Devin White, the super speedy linebacker from Tampa, who quite frankly fell out of favor in Tampa, is now going to be a key linebacker in Philly. Saquon Barkley, the running back. Green Bay, not the only team to go out and get an expensive free agent running back. Green Bay, of course, gets Josh Jacobs. The Eagles get Saquon Barkley and add him to their backfield. He'll take the place of DeAndre Swift, and I think we'll probably do a little bit more than taking his place. That's going to be a big addition for the Eagles on offense. I mentioned that New York Jets pass rusher. They bring in Bryce Huff, who was phenomenal in New York. Now, Huff's an interesting player where he is a pass rush specialist. He doesn't do a lot in the run game. He's not going to be in a ton on early downs, but my goodness, can he get after the quarterback? So he's going to come in on obvious passing downs, wreak havoc, and the Eagles have the depth along the edge rusher positions to make that work. But they not only get the draft capital from New York for Hassan Reddick, but they go out and get his replacement by signing away one of their better players from this past season. So Bryce Huff is in the stead or in to replace Hassan Reddick. You've got Kenny Pickett at quarterback, Jahan Dotson at wide receiver. They just traded for him. Mekhi Becton is going to play guard in Philly. Remember, he was the early draft pick for the New York Jets, who played offensive tackle for them, never really got off the ground, struggled with weight, and now he is in Philly, and he is likely going to be their starting right guard. It hasn't been announced officially, but it certainly seems to be leaning that way. And then remember, former Wisconsin Badger edge rusher Zach Bond, who came to the NFL, moved to linebacker. He's going to be one of those key linebackers next to Devin White on the interior of the linebacking core, He's not an edge rusher anymore. He plays off-ball linebacker, and again, he'll likely be next to Devin White out there quite a bit. They do have Nakobe Dean as well. They drafted Jeremiah Trotter Jr. In the draft, so they do have some options there as well, but Zach Bond figures to be part of that rotation as well. And that doesn't even include the draft. They go and get some players that I think a lot of Packer fans were interested in early in this draft. They get Quinyon Mitchell in round 1 and then come back and get Cooper DeJean in round 2. They get Jalix Hunt, somebody I really, really liked in this draft. It might take a little bit of time to develop, but this is exactly what Philly does. They draft these 4th, 5th round defensive ends, just like Josh Sweat was basically, and they let them develop in this rotation. Right now, Hunt doesn't have to be anything more than edge rusher number 5, but in probably a year or two when they need him, he'll probably be ready to be a pass rush specialist by that time. They get Will Shipley at running back, Ainias Smith at wide receiver, Jeremiah Trotter, who we talked about, Trevor Keegan at guard, Johnny Wilson at wide receiver, and then Dylan McMahon on the offensive line. So that was their overall draft class. So they added a ton of pieces to this team. And listen, this Eagles team knows what's at stake. They've got Jalen Hurts at quarterback. They have some really super talented players that we'll go over in just a moment, and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Saquon Barkley, who we just talked about. The offensive line has got Jordan Mailata, who's one of the best offensive tackles in football, who on the other side, it's Lane Johnson. Well, by the way, one of the best offensive tackles in football. They've got pass rushers. They've got cover corners. They've got safety. there is a lot of talent, but Philly knew that it is a win now proposition, that the window is clearly open. They've got an opportunity to go for it, and they weren't messing around. They went out and spent some serious money on Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Devin White, Saquon Barkley, Bryce Huff, trading draft picks and draft capital for Kenny Pickett and Jahan Dotson, and then taking some flyers on Zach Bond and Mekhi Becton. They went out and understood the assignment, and rightfully so. This is exactly what Philly should have done, is made this roster even better. They can't have another second half of last year. Yeah, Howie Roseman probably survives that as GM. I'm not sure Nick Sirianni does. If this season does not go according to plan, I think they probably go with a completely new head coach, which might also, in that situation, come with a new offensive coordinator and a new defensive coordinator. And that's really not what you want for this team that's trying to compete right now. And for Jalen Hurts, you don't want him to come off of a offense that he got used to coming into this league and then have to go to Kellen Moore and then next year something different. That's not great for anyone. So this is a massive, massive season incoming for the Philadelphia Eagles. And they went out in the draft and in free agency and spent like it because they know what is at stake. So what does their starting lineup look like? It's not too shabby. Quarterback Jalen Hurts, running back Saquon Barkley, wide receivers A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Jahan Dotson. Now we'll see how far Jahan Dotson is along and can he play a bunch of snaps, or is it going to take him a little bit more time to get acclimated in this offense? If he's ready, he is projected certainly as the wide receiver 3 in Philly. Tight end is going to be Dallas Goedert. Offensive line, Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens at center taking over for Jason Kelce, Mekhi Becton, who we talked about at right guard, again, not officially announced yet, but expected to be the starting right guard, and then Lane Johnson at right tackle. Along the defensive line, Milton Williams, Jordan Davis, and Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter is going to be a stud going into year 2. Edge rushers, Bryce Huff, Nolan Smith, Josh Sweat, Brandon Graham. All 4 of those guys will rotate through. Linebacker, Devin White, Zach Bond. Corners, Darius Slay, Quinyon Mitchell, and Isaiah Rodgers. And then safeties, CJ Gardner-Johnson, Reed Blankenship, and we might see some Cooper DeJean at a variety of different defensive back positions as well. Their kicker is Jake Elliott, their punter is Braden Mann, and their long snapper is former Green Bay Packer Rick Lovato. So those are sort of their starters / key players that you're going to kind of want to keep an eye on going into this week. I want to just take a step back as we sort of understand now where they were and what this roster looks like, what players and coaches are gone, what players or coaches are in. Just again, what happened at the end of last year and just how ugly this looked. Jalen Hurts, in his final 6 regular season games plus playoffs in 2023, had 7 passing touchdowns and 5 interceptions. Now, he did have 4 rushing touchdowns, which certainly helps that out quite a bit. But a 7-to-5 passing touchdown to interception ratio is certainly not what you expect out of Jalen Hurts at this point. He has shown to be much better a passer than that, and he needs to get back throwing the ball better and not at that 7-to-5 touchdown to interception ratio that we saw at the end of last year. And on the defensive side of the ball, in those final 6 games plus the playoffs, they allowed 30.6 points per game over those final 7 games. So if your quarterback has a almost neutral touchdown to interception ratio, and you're allowing 30.6 points per game, that is a recipe for disaster. And that is why you go 1-6 to end the year, sneak into the playoffs barely, or I would say back into the playoffs, not even sneak in. They just backed into it and then get crushed by Tampa Bay in the opening round. That's why. Offense looked bad. Defense looked bad. Couldn't beat anyone besides the Giants 1 out of every 2 times. And it was, like I said, an unmitigated disaster for Philly at the end of the year. And add on top of that, there certainly seemed to be a little bit of a rift between Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni. And that's going to be something that we're going to have to kind of keep an eye on, is how does Jalen Hurts take to this new offense? Is there, the openness and communication between Sirianni and Hurts? If you end up having some rifts and some, just weird dynamics with the coach and the quarterback, that is never a recipe for success. Meanwhile, you look at Green Bay being the exact opposite again, where everything was going swimmingly. Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur all on the same page. Love gets the highest paid quarterback contract in football. Everything's just a little bit more clear sailing for Green Bay. And again, that's what sort of makes this so intriguing, is you have this team that clearly has a crap ton of talent going against a team that is younger, a little bit more inexperienced. Maybe not quite the talent that Philly has, but all the rising talent. Philly has maybe a little bit more older players in some positions. They're certainly still young in a lot of positions as well, but it's just a very interesting juxtaposition. So what are the things that I'm kind of looking at this team? Number one, and I'll just say it one more time, the talent on the Eagles is undeniable. All right, we know Jalen Hurts can be a very good quarterback in this league. We know Saquon Barkley can be one of the best running backs. A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Jahan Dotson and Dallas Goedert, that can be one of the better, weapon groups in all of football. Their offensive line, Jordan Mailata, Lane Johnson, one of, if not the best tackle duos in all of football. Defensive line, they've got 4 guys they can rotate in at defensive ends. Jalen Carter looks ready to be an absolute beast in year 2. They've got speed at linebacker. They remade their secondary. There is talent all over this Eagles roster. But then the question is, how quickly do these changes take place? And how long does it take this Eagles team to sort of get acclimated to one another in this new offense and in this new defense? And I'm going to talk about this specific point, and this is kind of number 3 right now. I'll talk about it a lot more when we get to our preview later this week. But is it an advantage or is it a disadvantage for the Packers that they played this Eagles team early on in the year, neutral site in Brazil, and this Eagles team probably is not exactly a master of this new offense and this new defense yet? And guys like Jahan Dotson just got there. Mekhi Becton is still learning right guard. Like, a lot of their changes that they made are still very fresh and are going to probably not be mastered and sort of ironed out yet as they face the Packers in week 1. And that's just the truth. But you also have a little bit more of an element of surprise. The Packers cannot just go back and watch Philadelphia Eagles tape from the end of last year and be like, all right, we're prepared, because it is a brand new offense and it is a brand new defense. And that's going to be sort of the unique challenge for Green Bay is, yeah, they get the advantage of Philadelphia not being maybe well-versed in their new offense and defense yet, and a lot of changes all over the place, but it could be a little bit more unpredictable, harder to prepare for, and you get a lot more unscouted looks going into this game. And again, is that a plus or a minus for Philly or Green Bay? Only the game will ultimately tell. Number 4, Vic Fangio's defense. This is a defense that, let's just be real, is going out of vogue in the NFL. Now, Vic Fangio's a smart dude. That dude forgot more about football than 99.999% of the world, myself included, will ever know about football. I mean, he has defenses on top of defenses. He's aggressive. He's blitzing. He will attack you. He's going to be relentless. But this Vic Fangio defense isn't what it once was from an NFL standpoint. So the question there is, does he evolve? Matt LaFleur has had quite a bit of success against Fangio-style defenses in the NFL. So, that's not something as a Packer fan that you're super concerned about, that this is a Vic Fangio defense. Now, Vic Fangio did run it better than a lot of the Fangio disciples this past year, but not still in like a top 10 defense sort of way, not in Miami at least. Now, he's going to get a little bit more talent in Philly, but I want to know, is this same old Vic Fangio defense, or does he evolve in some way? Because if he doesn't, there's a chance that defense is just, dead on arrival in the NFL. Like, the teams have figured it out. Like, there are certain defense, like it'd be like Lovie Smith just coming back and be like, yep, just going to play Tampa 2. Just doing Tampa 2. Like, good luck, Lovie. It's not going to work as well. Or Tony Dungy. It's not going to work as well in 2024 as it once did. Is this Vic Fangio defense just passed by? Is it, it was a great flavor of the week for a while. It was a flavor for a long time, but now teams have sort of figured it out. Is this a good hire for Philly? That's going to be an interesting one. And how is Jalen Hurts going to work in Kellen Moore's offense? It's another really unique thing. There's going to be more under center for Jalen Hurts. I think that's a good thing overall for Jalen. Like, he needs to evolve. Like, he needs to probably take that next step and a little bit more under center, a little bit more play action. All that sort of stuff should only help him. But I'll say this one more time. It might help him more down the road than it might in week 1 against Green Bay. He might not have that comfort level quite yet as he goes against the Packers in week 1, and that could theoretically benefit Green Bay. I also want to know that 4th and 1 QB sneak. That was a very potent weapon for the Eagles. With Kelsey being gone, is that still as potent? Or do they come back to the pack and kind of run it like every other team and there's nothing special about it in Philly? I mean, they basically had an automatic first down anytime it was 4th and 1. They just picked it up. No big deal. Just run behind Jason Kelsey. He'll get you there. But now they don't have that. So is it as good, or is that not the weapon that maybe it once was? Another thing, I'm only bringing this up more for fun, but we know that Green Bay likes their Georgia defenders. Eric Stokes, Devontae Wyatt, Quay Walker, Javon Bullard, etc. Philly might like them even more. Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Nakobe Dean, Keely Ringo. You can almost put together, you probably could put together an entire defense just with Georgia players in this game. So we'll see who has the better Georgia defenders coming out of this one. Next is Mekhi Becton at right guard. That's a transition. Going from tackle to guard, hasn't really played it. I thought there were some positives that he showed in preseason, but there was one play towards the end when he got in there that he gave up a pressure. So he's going to be a little bit of a work in progress, I think, at that spot. And I think a Devontae Wyatt could have some success against Mekhi Becton. I think a Kenny Clark could have some success there. So how he fits at right guard will be very interesting for that Eagles offense. And it could theoretically be a weak point for them at right guard. How ready is Jahan Dotson in this offense? That's number 9 for me. I think, he's going to be a good player for them. I was a big fan of Dotson coming out. I know it didn't work great in Washington. They haven't exactly had the quarterbacks necessary. I think he will get unlocked a little bit more in Philadelphia. But again, I think it might come down the road a little bit more. I don't know that it's necessarily going to be week 1, but he is a heck of a wide receiver 3 for the Eagles. I can't believe the Commanders traded him in division, which you usually don't see very often, but that's a big pickup for them. And I'll just end where I kind of started a little bit, and that's just the overall weapons on offense. I mean, you think of all you have to think about as a defensive coordinator going against this group. I mean, where do you start, first of all? I probably start with A.J. Brown. Like, you cannot let that guy get going. He can beat you short, intermediate, or deep. The run after the catch is fantastic. He's just a one-man game wrecker. So you can't let him get going. Devontae Smith just keeps getting better and better opposite him, and he is a route runner extraordinaire, has the run after the catch, good speed. He's a heck of a player. We just talked about Jahan Dotson. Hopefully he's not quite ready yet, but he can get open. He's got a great route running tree. He's got great separation ability. And as a number 3, he's going to take some number 3 corners to task this upcoming year. Dallas Goedert is a fantastic receiving tight end with run after the catch ability. Saquon Barkley can do everything at running back. And then you also have to worry about Jalen Hurts, not only with his arm, but with his legs as well. So you have a mobile quarterback, a dynamic running back, 3 super talented wide receivers, including 2, that are, top tier in Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, and one of the better tight ends in all of football. That is a stacked playmaking group. And if you're Jeff Hafley, this is probably not the intro you wanted in week 1 as a new defensive coordinator. You love the challenge, but my goodness, it is going to be a challenge trying to figure out ways to stop all of these different playmakers on Philadelphia's offense. And last but not least, I'll just say a few, kind of final things here. This feels like a mystery team. I don't know what to make of Philly. Was the last year just fake? Was it not the real Eagles? Or was that the team that, we're starting to see, and it's just a decline, and maybe there's something that's a little bit rotten at the core. Maybe there is some disjointedness between the quarterback and the coach, or the team and the coach. I don't know. I'm not hypothesizing anything. It felt so bad at the end of last year. This team just crumbled on itself. Like, it just completely fell apart. And usually that goes to coaching in some extent. So how this team responds, this is a huge game in week 1. They go and get that win against Green Bay in week 1, and I think you'll see them start rebuilding that foundation and get going in a positive direction. You lose that game week 1, that is a brutal way to start after going 1-6 at the end of last year, again, including a bad loss to Tampa in the playoffs. Like I said, 2 teams very much trending in different directions. You get a neutral site game in Brazil in week 1. I don't know in what direction this is going to go because, again, you have these 2 very, very unique teams with a ton of talent matching up on a neutral site in week 1, which has the ability to be a little bit wonky in the first place because teams don't play as many players in preseason. So this almost is like a dress rehearsal in and of itself. This has the ability to be a bit chaotic. if you're interested. Eagles, currently 3-point favorites, which seems a bit aggressive to me because it is on a neutral field. But you know what? That's exactly what I want. That's exactly what the Packers want. Make them the underdogs and let them go against Philly in Brazil with what probably is more of a home crowd for Green Bay. Let's just see what Green Bay can do against this ultra-talented but very mysterious Philadelphia Eagles team. I'll have a full Packers-Eagles preview later this week. We're going to have some special guests on this week as well, so make sure to look forward to that. Make sure to check out, again, those PackADay Podcast YouTube memberships. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, give those 5-star reviews. We're so close. Packers-Eagles coming up on Friday. We've got a lot to talk about yet the remainder of this week, so again, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Shout out to our Hall of Fame and All-Pro members, Most Hated Minnesotan, PJ Wynn, John Wild, Shea Bradad, Brandon Paletta, Jennifer Wright, Boom Handle, Donald Lee, Lori Lord, Baby QB, David McCluskey, Donald Decker, Dan Miller, Alex Hwang, Arnaldo Espinoza, Peter Ataka, Caleb Cookster, SoCal Pack, Dan Guessford, Love and Football, and Jay Zimmerman. I will see you all soon, but until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.